LSU now has the number one ranked class in the 2025 cycle. The move into the top spot, it's because the number one player in America just announced his commitment to LSU. QB Bryce Underwood. The news is breaking as I speak. Just moments ago, he announced his commitment to the Tigers. So I got Shea Dixon from the Bengal Tiger with me to break it all down. It's an absolutely massive win for LSU. You got to think, in a year where the Wolverines are on top. All right, never mind. We're going to break it all down with Shea Dixon. But first, LSU fans, do me a favor. Hit subscribe to the On3 Recruits channel. It's an exciting time if you're an LSU fan, and we need you to be a part of this. All right, let's get Shea Dixon on here. Shea, how was LSU able to go into Michigan in a year where everything is going Michigan's way and pull out number one quarterback Bryce Underwood? How did it go down?
Yeah, this is one that I think you look back at one of my favorite recruiting sayings that I've come up with, which is watch what they do, not what they say. And Bryce Underwood didn't say a whole lot. He never went out there and drummed up any, this is the leader, this is the leader. He sort of just went through his recruitment. But if you tracked his visits, it was telling. He visited LSU unofficially 4 times in the span of 6 months.
Yeah.
This past offseason into this season. That included his mother's birthday weekend, his parents' anniversary weekend, weekends that normally recruits would stay back home. The entire family was in Baton Rouge for all 4 of those trips, which included a game visit for when they beat Auburn. So he got to see them in person. He got to spend a lot of time with the staff in the offseason. He was at summer camp when, for the first time ever, they took the LSU campers into Tiger Stadium, and he competed on the Tiger Stadium field during camp with guys like Harlem Berry and others who are big 2025 prospects and 5 stars, and who is now committed to LSU in both Berry and Underwood. So relationships were key here, and you can't go look much further than what Joe Sloan, LSU's quarterback coach, and then the co-offensive coordinator in the bowl game, did with this recruitment. And he had LSU in the mix, Josh, for 2 guys, Bryce Underwood and George McIntyre, before the rankings even came out. Now that the rankings have been out for a while, they're the number 1 and 2 quarterbacks in the country. So kudos to Joe Sloan for putting him in that position. We entered this season, though, Josh, everyone up in Michigan, whether it was E.J. Holland, Libby, any of those guys from On3, we all agreed this is a 50-50 race, it feels, between the in-state school Michigan and LSU. Yes, you mentioned it. Michigan is still riding high. They'll play for a national championship, undefeated, all of these things. LSU wins 10 games. But what it came down to, I think, or really what pushed it over the top, is one, from early on, Bryce said he wanted to play in the SEC. That was something that was intriguing to him. It wasn't the end-all, be-all, but obviously that played a role. 2, beyond the relationships, LSU threw the ball all over the field this year, and they end, no matter how Washington does on Monday night, with the number 1 offense in the country in terms of yards per game. They have a Heisman winner in Jaden Daniels. They just had a Heisman winner 5 years ago with Joe Burrow. Bryce Underwood sees that. And Josh, this is the biggest out-of-state commitment I can remember in my 20 years covering LSU football recruiting. And they've had some big ones, from Patrick Peterson to Russell Shepard, you name it. But going all the way to Michigan to get the number 1 overall player and it be a quarterback is something I haven't seen. And that's a big reason now that they're set up with the number 1 class.
Yeah. And really, I think those visits, that cluster of visits that he took in the summer into the fall was kind of the turning point, I think, of his recruitment. Of course, Michigan is Michigan, and they're the home state team, and they're going to be a player. And then Alabama gets that final visit, just to muddy the waters a little bit more. Alabama getting any final visit never sits well, but in the end, it is LSU. So let's talk a little bit more about Bryce Underwood on the field. How does he fit in Brian Kelly's scheme, and what are kind of his strengths that will kind of shine when he arrives in Baton Rouge?
Well, if you talk to our On3 rankings team, or guys like Charles Power or Cody Belair, I'm not sure how many weaknesses he has. We could just list off strengths for days, but This is a kid who has been a multi-time state champion already. He's going to have started all throughout his high school career, and he's got size. He's got a huge arm. He reads the field so well. And one thing to this point, we'll see how as a senior they play it, but they haven't asked him to run a lot. He can, though. He's a guy who can run the football. I think he's a guy in college that can run for 600-700 yards a year. We saw Jaden Daniels, obviously, as a true dual threat eclipse the 1,000-yard rushing mark. But Bryce is a guy that can do that too. I think he fits perfectly in to what LSU does. If you looked at Jaden Daniels, the transition to Garrett Nussmeier, two very different type of quarterbacks, but they're still operating under a similar scheme. I think Bryce slides right into that. And his natural talent, his abilities, he can really fit anywhere. I think what's intriguing to him is he looks around and look at this year's team with Jaden Daniels, Josh. Who led the nation among wide receivers in receiving? It wasn't any of the Washington guys. It wasn't an Ohio State guy. It was Malik Neighbors. Who led the country in receiving touchdowns? None of those other teams. It was Brian Thomas Jr., the other guy who plays opposite Malik Neighbors. So Underwood sees that there will be talent around him, and you don't have to go far down the commitment list. Look right under Underwood's name on the on-3 commitment list for LSU. You'll see a 5-star wide receiver in DeCorian Moore and a 5-star running back in Harlem Berry. They've recruited O-line so well since Brian Kelly's been here with Brad Davis. I think everything sort of just set up and came together for this to happen for Bryce Underwood to LSU.
Yeah, and it does set up nicely for LSU. You know, the 2024 cycle officially ends on February 7th, National Signing Day. So that's kind of when we technically start the 2025 cycle. But we all know 2025 is alive and well as we speak, because right now LSU already has, like you hit on, those 3 number ones at their position. Number 1 quarterback Bryce Underwood, number 1 running back Harlem Berry, number 1 wide receiver DeCorian Moore. So Shea, what is next for LSU's 2025 class?
Kind of almost feel like the sky's the limit, right? I mean, not often do you look at any recruiting class and say they have the number 1 player at those 3 skill positions. Now, LSU also has some big targets also already on board. Keelan Moses at linebacker. They have a number of Louisiana kids already committed who are all the highest ranked players at their position in Louisiana. And it's always going to start here. And I'm here in Baton Rouge. They'll recruit Louisiana as often as they do each cycle, which means double-digit players. And it's a deep year in Louisiana. But they'll dip into East Texas. They'll go into other spots. And then obviously they'll go around the country. If guys like Bryce Underwood are interested, that's who you go after. That being said, I think now you start to see, yes, other guys will follow at receiver, or you name the positions on offense. But this is such a big commitment that it will resonate with defensive players. That's also where LSU needs a big focus. Obviously, they just cleaned house on defense. No pun intended there, but Brian Kelly firing everyone on the defensive side, hiring all new coaches. You want to be able to build up talent there and not have to rely on the portal. So I think what's next is dominoes dropping on defense for LSU in this 2025 cycle.
Well, there's a lot to look forward to, but the foundation is set with these number ones, and especially number 1 quarterback Bryce Underwood makes his decision today. Shea Dixon from the Bengal Tiger, you guys have it all covered. Go check it out if you need any more, but great having you on the Inside Scoop.
Josh, we wore our sweatshirts to match together. These are our solidarity for the person who put in the very first Bryce Underwood pick, and then the person who put in the highest confidence in the Bryce Underwood pick at 90%.
Make sure who was the first?
Josh Newberg of the Inside Scoop and the On3 Football Recruiting Show.
Okay. All right. That's why you're subscribed.
You can send a check in the mail.
Yeah. All right, Shea, thanks a lot. We'll talk to you soon, man. Great having you on the show.
Thanks for having me on, Josh.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed that content, be sure to subscribe to the On3 Recruits channel. We have a new page dedicated only to recruiting. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now.